The Apache's warning alarms screamed as red lights flooded the cockpit like the fires of hell.
Engine failure! We're going down!
Major Peter Powell shouted, his knuckles white as he fought the controls with everything he had. The helicopter lurched violently to the left, spinning toward the unforgiving desert floor at terminal velocity. In the gunner seat, Scarlett Maxis gripped her harness until her knuckles matched Powell's, watching the ammunition she'd been loading just hours earlier scatter across the floor like deadly confetti. What should have been a routine equipment check had turned into a nightmare in the span of heartbeats.
Mayday, Mayday, Apache 7-2 going down. Coordinates 34.2108 north, 65.1372 east.
Powell's voice cracked over the radio as sweat poured down his face. But how had a simple maintenance check turned into this death spiral? How had they ended up in the air together when just 3 hours earlier she was nothing more than another invisible technician loading ammunition? To understand that, we need to go back to where it all began. Welcome to Quiet Tales Studio. Before we uncover the extraordinary story of Scarlett Maxis, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories of hidden heroes deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support our mission.
3 hours earlier, the desert sun blazed mercilessly over Kandahar Airbase as Staff Sergeant Scarlett Maxis methodically fed a belt of 30mm shells into an AH-64 Apache's chain gun. Her flame-red hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, covered by a worn military cap that had seen better days. Unlike the other technicians working in pairs, laughing and sharing stories from home, Scarlett worked alone. Her movements were precise, economical. Nothing wasted, nothing flashy. Just the steady rhythm of someone who had performed this task thousands of times before. The familiar weight of each round in her hands was almost comforting after 3 years of the same routine. Day 1, 095 to be exact, though no one on base would know she kept such careful count. Across the tarmac, 2 junior mechanics glanced her way, their voices carrying in the still morning air despite their attempts at discretion. "Who's the redhead working solo?" asked Private Chris Anderson, a new transfer whose fresh uniform and unweathered skin marked him as recently arrived. "That's Maxis, been here forever." Sergeant Noah Daly responded with a dismissive shrug. "Keeps to herself. Weird one, but she does the work of 3 people. Scarlett gave no indication she'd heard them, though she cataloged the conversation along with dozens of others she absorbed daily. Intelligence gathering took many forms, and being forgettable had significant operational advantages that most people couldn't comprehend. Captain Gilberto Miazga approached with unnecessary swagger, his boots striking the tarmac with the confidence of someone who believed his rank made him important. "Maxis! Need you to realign the missile systems on Apache 3 when you're done here. The new kid screwed up the targeting parameters." "Yes, sir," Scarlett replied without looking up, her voice carrying none of the authority it had once commanded. "And requisitions needs yesterday's inventory report. Should have been submitted already," Miazga added, as if piling additional tasks onto someone already working overtime was standard procedure. Another nod. No protest about the workload that would normally require a team. No explanation about why a single technician was handling responsibilities typically distributed among multiple personnel. As Miazga walked away already shouting orders at someone else, 2 privates passing by snickered at the interaction. "Morning, Red Nobody," one called with a mock salute. The ammunition round Scarlett was holding slipped slightly, clattering against the others before she caught it. Her face betrayed nothing, though the nickname stung more than she would ever admit. Not because of wounded pride, but because of how dramatically ironic it truly was. From across the airfield, Major Peter Powell watched the interaction with growing interest. He was the squadron leader, known for precision flying and demanding standards that had kept his pilots alive through 2 combat deployments. Something about Scarlett's methodical approach caught his attention. The way she checked connections that most technicians overlooked. Her attention to detail that exceeded standard protocol by significant margins. Powell had been observing her work for weeks, noting irregularities that suggested training far beyond her apparent station. The way she instinctively positioned herself with tactical awareness, how she seemed to anticipate equipment needs before they arose. The subtle confidence in her movements that spoke of experience under pressure. "Sergeant Maxis," Powell called out, approaching her workstation with measured steps. Scarlett looked up with carefully calibrated surprise, as if unused to being directly addressed by senior officers. "Sir, the left rocket pod. You're running an unusual configuration," he stated. More observation than accusation, but his tone suggested genuine curiosity rather than criticism. "Better suited for the limestone structures and potential target areas, sir," Scarlett responded softly. Her voice carried surprising authority despite its quietness. The voice of someone accustomed to being listened to, momentarily breaking through her carefully maintained facade. Powell nodded, clearly impressed by the tactical assessment that exceeded what he'd expect from a maintenance technician. "How did you know about the limestone structures?" "Mission briefings are posted on the board, sir. I read them during equipment prep." As Scarlett reached overhead to secure an ammunition bay, her sleeve rode up slightly. Just below her left forearm, the edge of an intricate geometric tattoo became visible. Not random artwork, but a precise pattern with embedded symbols that made Powell's blood run cold. The coffee mug in his hand shattered against the tarmac. Powell's mind flashed to classified briefings from his time at Fort Bragg, redacted files bearing those exact symbols. A mission dossier from Syria 5 years ago. The insignia of an elite unit officially disbanded after Operation Phoenix Dawn, a mission so classified that most generals weren't aware of its existence. A unit whose members were either dead or reassigned to deep cover positions throughout the military. A unit whose commander had been posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for sacrifice beyond the call of duty. Scarlett noticed his expression change, the sudden recognition flooding his eyes like a dam breaking. Their gazes locked across the wreckage of his shattered mug. She gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Not here. Not now." For a moment, neither moved. The desert wind whistled between them, carrying the scent of aviation fuel and desert sand. Then Powell backed away slowly, visibly unsettled, his mind racing with implications that could change everything. But now, he couldn't stop glancing back at the quiet woman loading his helicopter, suddenly seeing someone completely different from the invisible technician everyone else ignored. "Sergeant Maxis," Powell said, his voice carefully controlled, "I'd like you to accompany me on a test flight this afternoon. New ammunition configuration needs field testing." It wasn't really a request. Scarlett nodded once. "Yes, sir." 2 hours later, they were airborne. Now, as the Apache spiraled toward the desert floor with both engines dead and hydraulics failing, Powell understood that nothing about this day had been coincidental. The ammunition configuration, the test flight, even the engine failure, everything connected to patterns he was only beginning to recognize. "Impact in 30 seconds!" Powell shouted over the screaming alarms. That's when Scarlett did something that shattered every assumption anyone had ever made about her. Her hands moved across the control panel with surgical precision, fingers dancing over switches and circuits that weren't part of her job description. She rerouted auxiliary power through secondary systems, manually engaging backup hydraulics that hadn't been used since the aircraft's last major overhaul. "What are you doing?" Powell demanded, watching in amazement as she performed modifications that should have been impossible for a maintenance technician. "Emergency Landing Protocol Phoenix 7, Scarlett replied, her voice now carrying unmistakable command authority. "Reduce airspeed to 40 knots. Angle of descent 15 degrees. Prepare for tactical crash landing." Powell's hands moved automatically to comply, his pilot training responding to the voice of someone clearly qualified to give such orders. But his mind struggled to process the transformation happening before his eyes. The quiet, invisible technician was gone. In her place sat someone who moved with the fluid confidence of elite military training, someone who understood this aircraft better than its own pilots. "Who the hell are you?" Powell shouted as they approached the ground. "Later," Scarlett replied, preparing for impact. "Right now, we survive." The Apache hit the desert floor hard, bouncing twice before sliding to a stop in a cloud of sand and debris. Both occupants were thrown against their restraints, but Scarlett's modifications had reduced what should have been a fatal crash to a survivable emergency landing. As the dust settled and the engines finally fell silent, Powell turned to stare at the woman beside him. Her red hair had come loose from its bun, framing a face that no longer carried the practiced invisibility of a maintenance worker. "Colonel Scarlett Phoenix Maxis," she said quietly, meeting his gaze with eyes that held the weight of classified operations and buried secrets. "Phoenix Protocol. And we need to get out of here before they realize the crash wasn't an accident." "They?" Powell asked. But Scarlett was already moving, checking their location and scanning the horizon with the tactical awareness of someone trained for survival in hostile territory. "The same people who sabotaged our engines," she replied, pointing to a dust cloud approaching from the east. "The same network I've been hunting for 3 years." As vehicles approached their crash site, Scarlett's transformation completed itself. Gone was any trace of the deferential technician. Her movements became fluid, predatory, as she gathered survival equipment from the Apache's emergency kit. "Major Powell," she said, her voice carrying the authority of superior rank, "I need you to listen carefully. Everything you think you know about my assignment here is cover. I'm not maintenance. I'm hunting a traitor network that's been selling targeting data to insurgent forces." Powell struggled to process the revelation while watching her work. "The tattoo. Phoenix Protocol. I remember the briefings, but they said everyone from that unit was dead. Yes, that was the cover story." Scarlett finished checking her sidearm with practiced efficiency. "Some of us were reassigned to deep cover operations. I've been here 3 years tracking the source of intelligence leaks that have killed American soldiers. The approaching vehicles were closer now, close enough to see armed figures moving with military precision, not a rescue operation." "Today's sabotage confirms what I suspected," Scarlett continued. "Someone on base is coordinating with hostile forces. The engine failure wasn't mechanical. It was remote electronic interference." "Commander Andres de Villa," Powell said suddenly, pieces clicking into place. "He's been asking detailed questions about flight schedules, crew assignments. I thought he was just thorough." Scarlett's expression hardened. "He's more than thorough. He's the leak." The first vehicle reached their position, and armed figures began deploying in tactical formation. These weren't American soldiers coming to their aid. "Time to go," Scarlett announced, gathering equipment with swift efficiency. "Can you move?" Powell tested his legs, finding them bruised but functional. "Where?" "Those rock formations, 2 clicks east. We make our stand there." She handed him a rifle from the Apache's weapon storage. "Think you can keep up with a maintenance technician?" Despite everything, Powell almost smiled. "Lead the way, Colonel." They moved across the desert terrain, with Scarlett setting a pace that Powell, despite his pilot training, struggled to match. Her movement was economical, efficient, covering ground while maintaining awareness of their pursuers and potential cover positions. Behind them, hostile forces reached the crashed Apache and began spreading out in search patterns. Professional, organized, clearly operating with intelligence about their movements and capabilities. "How many?" Powell asked as they reached the relative safety of the rock formations. Scarlett peered around at outcropping, counting figures and analyzing their equipment. 12 hostiles, mixed small arms, 2 with long-range weapons. Professional deployment suggests military training. Insurgents, mercenaries. Probably hired through the same network that's been compromising our operations. She checked her ammunition count. They're here to eliminate witnesses, not capture prisoners. Powell positioned himself behind cover, rifle ready. "What's the plan?" For the first time since the crash, Scarlett smiled. It wasn't the nervous expression of a maintenance worker. It was the cold confidence of someone who had been waiting 3 years for exactly this opportunity. "We're going to do what Phoenix Protocol was designed for," she said, her voice carrying deadly promise. "Hunt the hunters." What followed was a masterclass in asymmetric warfare that Powell would never forget. Scarlett moved through the rock formations like a ghost, using terrain and tactics that transformed their defensive position into a deadly maze for their pursuers. She didn't just engage the enemy, she orchestrated their destruction with surgical precision. Using her intimate knowledge of their equipment and standard operating procedures, she anticipated their movements, exploited their communication protocols, and turned their own advantages against them. The first hostile fell to a precisely placed shot from an elevated position. The second and third were eliminated when Scarlett used their own grenade to collapse a rock overhang, crushing them beneath tons of stone. How was she doing this? Powell whispered to himself, watching Scarlett systematically dismantle a force that should have overwhelmed 2 isolated soldiers. By the time base rescue helicopters arrived 2 hours later following the Apache's emergency beacon, they found 12 dead mercenaries and 2 very much alive American soldiers sitting calmly in the shade of the rock formations. Major Powell, Sergeant Maxis, the rescue commander, announced as his team secured the area. Command wants immediate debriefing on your crash and these hostile contacts. Tell Command, Scarlett said, standing and brushing sand from her uniform, that Colonel Scarlett Maxis requests direct communication with General Matt Hagland, Phoenix Protocol Authorization Tango 77. The rescue commander's expression shifted from routine professionalism to shocked recognition. Colonel, but the records show what they needed to show, Scarlett interrupted. Now they need to show the truth. Back at Kandahar Airbase, the transformation was complete. Word spread quickly through unofficial channels that the quiet redhead everyone had ignored was actually a highly decorated special operations officer, conducting a classified investigation. Commander Andres Davia was arrested within hours, his attempts to flee the base intercepted by security forces who had been discreetly positioned based on Scarlett's intelligence. His communications equipment revealed a network of contacts that stretched across multiple theaters of operation. In General Hagland's office, surrounded by classified files and secure communication equipment, Scarlett briefed the command staff on 3 years of painstakingly gathered intelligence. The mercenary attack confirms what we suspected, she explained, indicating positions on a tactical map. The targeting data leaks weren't random. They were coordinated to maximize American casualties while protecting specific insurgent leadership. How long have you known about Davila? General Hagland asked. 18 months. But I needed proof of the larger network, not just one compromised officer. Scarlett activated a secure display showing financial transfers, communication logs, and operational timelines. He's been selling flight schedules, target data, and personnel information to a consortium of private military contractors who then sell that intelligence to the highest bidder. Major Powell, still processing the day's revelations, asked the question everyone was thinking: how many people died because of this network? Scarlett's expression hardened. 43 confirmed American fatalities directly attributable to compromised operations, probably twice that number wounded. Unknown civilian casualties. The room fell silent as the implications settled over them. Today's operation was designed to force Davila into the open, Scarlett continued. The engine sabotage, the mercenary response, all of it confirms his involvement and provides the evidence needed for prosecution. General Hagland leaned back in his chair, studying the woman who had operated under his command for 3 years without his knowledge. Colonel Maxis, your service record indicates you're qualified for any assignment in the military. Why 3 years undercover as a maintenance technician? Because maintenance technicians are invisible, Scarlett replied simply. They have access to aircraft, communications, personnel schedules, and mission parameters, and nobody pays attention to what they see or hear. The tattoo, Powell added. Why keep it visible if you were maintaining cover? Scarlett almost smiled. Insurance. If something happened to me, if my cover was blown or I was killed, someone with the right clearance level would eventually notice and ask questions. It was a fail-safe. And it worked, Powell acknowledged. 3 days later, Colonel Scarlett Maxis stood on the Kandahar airfield in her proper uniform, complete with rank insignia and service decorations that told the story of a career most soldiers could only dream of achieving. Her red hair caught the morning sunlight as she supervised the loading of her gear onto a transport aircraft. The base personnel who had ignored her for 3 years now stood at respectful attention as she prepared to depart for her next assignment. The quiet technician they had dismissed was revealed to be one of the most highly decorated officers in special operations. Major Powell approached as she completed her final inspections. Where to now, Colonel? "That's classified," Scarlett replied, but her slight smile suggested she appreciated the question. "Let's just say there are other networks that need investigating, other traitors who think they're safely hidden. Any advice for those of us who remain?" Powell asked. Scarlett looked across the airfield, where maintenance technicians, mechanics, and support personnel continued their vital but often overlooked work. "Pay attention to the invisible people. Sometimes the most important work happens in the shadows." As her transport lifted off into the clear blue sky, leaving Kandahar Airbase behind, Scarlett was already reviewing files for her next mission. The Phoenix Protocol continued, hunting those who preyed on American soldiers, operating in the shadows where justice could be served without fanfare or recognition. 3 years of being invisible had ended, but Colonel Scarlett Maxis remained what she had always been, a ghost in the machine, protecting those who would never know her name or understand the price she paid for their safety. The hunt never truly ends. It just moves to new hunting grounds, pursuing new prey who think they're safely hidden in the dark. But Phoenix always rises from the ashes, and some flames burn too bright to ever be extinguished. This story was brought to you by Quiet Tales Studio. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever known someone who was more than they appeared to be? Tell us in the comments about the hidden heroes in your life. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support our mission of sharing tales of invisible heroes. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone ignores. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never ask for recognition. And sometimes the quiet redhead loading ammunition is actually hunting the most dangerous prey of all, those who betray their own.